Hi, everyone, and happy Monday. Welcome to this week's edition of Compass Intelligence. My name is Dave Crosby. I am the Chief Data and Analytics Officer here at Compass. This week I'm filling in for Mike Simonson, our Chief Economist, who is traveling. One of the questions that we're interested in, among many, is whether or not the government shutdown has already begun to impact home sales. The weekly pending home sales data this week dipped below last year's pace for the first time in our count since mid-August. Up to this point, we've been counting between 1 and 5% more sales started every week. However, this week we counted fractionally fewer. Is it a new trend or just a one-week blip? Last year at this time, the market was showing surprising strength as mortgage rates had dipped into the low 6% range. At that time, more offers were being made and prices were slightly elevated from what they had been at the end of the summer. Hence, market activity this year now faces a stronger comparison to last year. It could be that next week and subsequent weeks continue to show year-on-year declines. In addition to that, there is quite a bit of uncertainty overhanging the market right now. Here's a few. Number one, the government shutdown is now 20 days old and counting. And as a result, there are many reasons that home sales cannot complete. For example, if the transaction is being financed with any number of government programs, whether it's VA or USDA or SBA loans, those transactions quite likely will face conditions where certain approvals cannot happen. Therefore, the deals won't be able to close or they will be delayed. In addition, government payrolls are also delayed, and that adds another factor of employment insecurity, which cascades through the economy. Secondly, there are other fears percolating in the economy. Labor and wage trends are very uncertain and are showing signals of softening. Tariff activity continues to be dynamic, with uncertain effects trickling into prices. This means that over the next few months, we're facing potential trade-offs, among other things, between a weakening economy headlined by a softer jobs market versus potential increases in economic activity spurred by slowly declining interest rates. Which one's going to win? Will lower rates help catalyze real estate demand, which has been pretty soft, or will economic fears take homebuyer demand even lower than it is today? This week was the first week in several months where it looks like maybe the bear is going to win over the bull. However, it's just 1 week, definitely not a trend, but that's why we watch the weekly pending home sales data so close. If you're new to these videos, we look at the U.S. housing market data every single week. Our goal is to help everyone understand what's actually happening in the market right now so they can make the best decisions when buying or selling a home. In these videos, we use data from both Altos Research as well as insights from here at Compass, the largest real estate brokerage in the country by sales volume. If you find these videos and the data that we share helpful, please add yourself to our Compass Intelligence mailing list. There's a link in the description down below to join us. This is a new list. We're creating it from scratch, but we've already had thousands of people join, and you should too. Okay, so let's jump into the data. We are 2/3 of the way through the month of October. That seems crazy to say that. We're going to start this week with weekly pending home sales. I have 5 data sets I'm going to share with you. Just as a quick orientation on the slides, we typically round the numbers to the nearest thousand. In the voiceover, I'll try and give you the actual number as a reference. This week, we counted 59,755 single-family homes that went into contract. That was down 12 basis points from the same week a year ago. As I noted before, the past few months we've seen between 1 and 5% increases in the weekly pending home sales. This was the first week with fewer sales started than the same week a year ago since mid-August. Also, for those of you interested in condos, we counted 12,105 new pending sales, which was up 5% over the same period last year. All right, on to inventory. As of this week's data, there are 859,419 single-family homes on the market. That's a small 30 basis point increase from last week. With one exception, That's now 13 weeks consecutively hovering around the 860,000 mark, with a peak reading of 865,000 at the beginning of August. Now, under typical circumstances, what we would expect to see is inventory marching lower every single week until the end of the year. Given the increase that we observed this week, we're very curious to understand the underlying dynamics. For example, is this due to fewer transactions taking place? Are deals already failing to close because of the government shutdown? We're going to continue to monitor and analyze this trend very closely, so please stay tuned to learn if the story has suddenly changed. Compared to 2024, which is the purple line, there are now 16% more homes on the market than this time last year. However, that gap between this year and last year has been compressing. Earlier in the year, inventory was growing at 30% ahead of 2024 versus the 16% that we see this week. New listings are also declining. We know that inventory growth this week was not from a new listing surge. There were 60,788 newly listed single-family homes this week, plus an additional 8,649 new listings that were immediate sales, for a total of 69,437 new sellers on the market this week. That represents a 6% decline from last week and a 1.3% decline from last year. We've been tracking the pullback in new listings for a few weeks now. New listings heading lower tends to imply a cap on total unsold inventory. All right, two more data points. This one is probably my favorite one right now, or the most interesting, I should say, related to home prices. And this one, we're going to look at the price per square foot. The nominal median price of newly pending single-family homes this week came in at $399,000. That's unchanged for the week, and it's 2.5% higher than this time last year. But that said, the asking price on a per square foot basis continues to be the measure showing or signaling the weakest change compared to last year. At $214, the price per square foot nationally is 50 basis points below last year. You can see that here on this chart, where the blue line has now crossed below the purple line. This measure is one of the first to show national home price declines compared to 2024. Other measures like the Case-Shiller Index are still showing a 1 to 2% home price appreciation year on year. But please remember that most numbers reported in this industry lag what's actually occurring in the market right now. One more reason why we watch and report on these numbers every single week. Will next year show home sales growth with home price declines? The likelihood of that situation appears to be increasing each week. All right, lastly, let's do a quick check-in on the days on market data, given the trends we're seeing in inventory and potentially softening prices. Note, this is for pending single-family homes, but generally represents a consistent pattern for the broad real estate market. The current median days on market, shown here by the purple line, is 49 days, which is 17% higher than this time last year. Or said differently, properties that go under contract this year are spending 17% longer on the market than last year. However, if you look at the prior years, 2022 and 2023, it's kind of hard to see on here, but if you can find the October data points on here, that comparison is 75% more time on the market, meaning the 49 days on the market, median days on market, is 75% more or greater than what it was in 2022 and 2023. Based on overall market trends and what you can see here on the chart, days on market will continue to increase through January and then likely fall off in February as the spring market begins to heat up. Okay, so wrapping up for today, inventory continues to sit on its current plateau. The big question, one of the big questions, is whether we observe consistent patterns to prior years or not, given current macroeconomic conditions. Weekly pending sales, new listings, and even price per square foot are signaling small declines. Will that trend continue? Both median and average days on the market show properties sitting on the market longer than ever compared to the same periods in prior years, at least over the last 3 years. As always, in this market, and in any market for that matter, agents and their clients should be taking advantage of every tool at their disposal to price, market, and negotiate strategically. That's all we have time for this week. Mike will be back next week with a new round of data and observations. Thank you so much for tuning in.